CBD has become super easy to find. There are specialty stores that focus on CBD products to grocery stores that carry the stuff infused with CBD. This is both great, but confusing as well. I mean, when it comes to CBD, you want to be sure you are getting what you are paying for, that the quality is of the highest standards. But how do you know?
The answer is super easy. Floyd's of Leadville. Hottie and I have been using their tinctures, capsules, and balms for a couple of seasons now, so we know firsthand that Floyd's does it right. But suppose you want more. If for some reason you want more than just our word on it. How do you find out more? Well, Floyd's hears ya, and they've posted something at floydsofleadville.com, CBD purity ratings, performed by a third-party certified lab.
The lab results show both potency and contamination. Does it guarantee results? No. But it does give peace of mind that what you're taking comes from the best, pure sources of CBD without adding stuff you don't need or want. When I first started taking Floyd's products, I just dove right in. But having purity test results makes great sense considering all that is going on in this industry.
Yeah, so to find the best CBD products on the market and the test results that back up that claim, go to floydsofleadville.com and use the code FATTY at checkout for a 15% discount. And thanks as always, Floyd's of Leadville, for sponsoring our show.
3, 2, 1.
Leadville, the podcast for the 100-mile mountain bike race presented by Floyd's of Leadville. This is season 3, episode 13 of the show that breaks down, builds up, gets you ready, freaks you out for the highest and hardest one-day mountain bike race in the country. I am Michael Houghton, Hottie to most.
And I'm Eldon Nelson, but please feel free to call me Fatty. We have covered a lot of topics in this show. We've talked about coronavirus. We've talked about bike skills. And last episode, we talked about owning your big mistakes. And that was just part 1. We've got 2 more of episodes on that topic going on in the series. So watch your feed. And we have a lot of stories coming up on from some of the best known endurance riders as well as racers like us and like yourselves. But right now, the time has come for us to talk about some bike geekery, specifically a topic and what I would say is the most important component you can never cover in too much detail. That is your wheels.
Yep, this is the wheels episode. Finally, it has arrived. We have a couple of interviews in this show, one with our resident wheel builder and wrench, Ryan Morse of Diablo Wheelworks, on building custom wheels. And we check in with ENVE on the latest tech and trends. And as you might imagine, Fatty, you and I will have our own spin, in quotation marks, on wheels.
Oh, puns and wheels. I hope we have lots of those. So out of the gate here, Hottie, we have a Leadville challenge of sorts. The race series, in lieu of the regular Leadville 100 and the Silver Rush and all that, they've put together a 100,000-foot challenge that the Hammer and I have signed up for. The idea behind it's super simple. Do 100,000 feet of climbing between June 20th, that is this weekend, and August 15th, which would have been the day of the race. The money's going to help kids in Leadville, and so the $100, it was an easy sale for Lisa and me. I will not say that it's going to be easy to do the 100,000 feet of climbing between now and what would have been race day, but honestly, we would have done it anyway because where we live, every after-work ride and every long weekend ride includes between 2,000 and 10,000 feet of climbing. Partially, we've also got this sort of fear of missing out thing going on with Leadville. I don't want them coming out with a buckle without me having one. So we're happy to be part of it. And we want our listeners to check it out as well. And you can find details of it at leadvilleraceseries.com.
Yeah, it's a 100,000-foot challenge. They have both hiking/running and a bike challenge, or both. Ouch. That sounds tremendously hard.
Ridiculous.
I think, for those of us on the West Coast or near the Appalachians.
In the mountains. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty easy. Like for you, Fatty, you've got mountains right outside your doorstep. The Santa Monicas are close to me. If you live in Denver. Obviously, the Rocky Mountains are right there. But the real challenge, I think, in this event is for people in the middle section of our country where hills are a little hard to come by. Or if you're in Florida, man, or Louisiana, that's got to be a tough call. Actually, this challenge brings to mind a conversation we were having with our other podcast host from our other show, the Marginal Gains podcast, Josh Portner. Now, Josh, a terrific guy, very smart guy, lives in Indianapolis. And for our last show, we were talking about Everesting. And I asked Josh, hey, Josh, if you had to do an Everest challenge in Indianapolis, where would you find an appropriate hill? And he took a long pause and went, well, the closest thing he has is an 80-meter climb. Now, metrics to feet, that is what, 262 feet, 80 meters. So just to do
that is not a lot.
I know, just to do an Everesting challenge, he would have to climb the thing like 110 times. Now, Fatty, you and I did the math real quick before we started recording here. If he wanted to do this 100,000-foot challenge in Indianapolis, and, keep it reasonable, not like do day trips every day to go out and tackle his hill, like ride from his house or drive a short distance from his house, he would have to use that 80-meter hill, and it would cost him 381 trips up that thing to get the 100,000-foot challenge. So look, folks, Fatty and I, for the folks who are challenged vertically, who don't have the topography that we do out west, or the folks in the Appalachian chain do, or the folks maybe in Vermont do, we feel for you. And we hope you'll find a way to do this that doesn't involve, 300 hours on Zwift or something like that. And if we'd love to hear your solutions to this too. If you do, again, have an area where you don't have the bumps of the Rocky Mountains or the Sierra Nevada or what have you, we'd love to hear how you're going to tackle the 100,000-foot challenge.
Yeah, how many climbs up and over the local overpass are you going to have to do in order to get 100,000 feet? For us, like you said, Hadi, this is basically a train like you normally would for the Leadville 100, and I'm going to automatically get that 100,000 feet of climbing. I will say, and I think this is pretty interesting. Lisa looked up how much climbing she did on foot prior to doing the Lead Woman last year, which she did very well, and she podiumed in that thing. And she did not do 100,000 feet of climbing before the Lead Woman. And it's not like she was being lazy. She just scienced the hell out of this, out of her training and did it right. 100,000 feet of climbing before August 22nd. That is a lot. And maybe not even advisable. I don't know. So, I mean, they picked a big number for the people who are doing this on foot. For the people who are going to do both 100,000 on wheels and 100,000 feet on foot, I don't know. That's all you're going to be doing this summer. That is an extraordinary amount, and maybe a ridiculous amount of on foot and on wheel climbing.
Yeah, we love the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race, but I don't know. For years, I thought, man, those runners get the tougher bit in my mind. That is
for sure.
Steep, hard challenge, just the 100-mile day itself. And now again, with this 100,000-foot challenge, they sound like they've got the tougher of the two.
For sure. And in the end, you're donating $100 to, the proceeds of which are going to go to a good cause, right? Leadville, like the rest of the U.S., is having a tough time right now, and you're going to be helping out some kids who could use some help. That said, if you don't hit that 100,000 feet of climbing because you live in the Midwest or it is too much climbing, doesn't matter, right? You can get a buckle anywhere. This is a cool challenge, but it's almost like how easy is it going to be to get depends on where you live.
I have been a big fan of Noon hydration products for years. I drink tons of that sport and vitamin drink mix, both in the tab form. And speaking of the tabs, I love the convenience of being able to carry a tube of tabs with me on my long rides. Makes staying on my preferred drink that much easier. Noon has now taken it up a notch, though, with its suite of products targeted at the endurance athlete. And the Podium series from Noon is available from our friends at The Feed. Over the weekend, I tried the Endurance Mix. This is the new Endurance Mix from the Podium series from Noon in strawberry lemonade. one of 4 flavors they offer. Easy drinking and good tasting on what was a warm and at times hot Southern California trail ride.
Yeah, this noon drink is different than the other drink that we also like from the feed, Morton's, and it is much lower in calories. It's just 60 calories to be exact. That means it's great for the athlete who likes to combo up their drinking with bars or gels or other food. Morton is an all-in-one. Noon leaves room for food out of your pocket. The Noon Endurance Mix also has electrolytes to help keep cramps at bay. Very important. The flavor Hottie Drink has caffeine. The other 3 do not. And I will say that this Saturday, I'm going to be doing a big ride and plan to be using this new Noon Endurance Trifecta.
Again, the new Noon Endurance Drink is part of the Podium series by Noon. There's also a pre-hydration drink and a post-workout drink that Fatty and I will be trying, Fatty specifically this weekend, and we'll be getting your full report in our next show, Fatty. Everything in the Podium series comes in single-serving packets or 16-serving canisters, and all of it is available at the feed. Go to thefeed.com/Leadville and sign up for that 15% discount. Now, there's nothing like a new bike frame, I say. It is the center point of any bicycle. It is the platform on which we ride. It is the thing that draws in our eyes. I have a new frame right now. I think, Fatty, I was showing it off on Instagram the other day. You loved it, right?
Beautiful.
Beautiful looking frame. But Fatty, early on in the racing thing, I'm glad I figured out that the place to spend your money is not so much on the frame, but on your wheels and tires. And when it comes to wheels, getting a pair of custom-built wheels has always been money well spent.
Yeah, it sure is. It used to be the only way to get high-end wheels was to custom build. Avit changed that, but the custom wheel business has definitely been seeing a comeback lately, kind of like custom steel frames have found new life. And this is really something to consider if you're building a bike, especially for competition and performance. The more tailored to you and your needs, the better.
My 2 fastest finishes at Leadville were both on custom wheels, Stan's rims with American Classic hubs. I still ride custom stuff for the most part. MVM 50s with DT Swiss, Head Belgium Plus with Chris King hubs. I even have a set of Mavic Open Pros with Shimano Durace hubs, 10-speed, so kind of old school. Not to mention the wheel sets that have come and gone, too. Custom wheel sets. I mean, just a plethora. What I can say about all of them is they have been the most reliable and easiest to service wheels when needed. So custom wheels, are they for you? Well, Fatty, let's find out from our good friend Ryan Morse of Diablo Wheelworks. First, I have a confession, Ryan.
What's that?
You know, first, thanks for being back on for
My
season
pleasure.
3.
Thank you for having me.
All last year, I was calling your business Diablo Wheelworks, and here's the explanation. I have an explanation, Ryan. It's a good one. So in NorCal, where I'm from, the Walnut Creek area, there is Mount Diablo.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. And you know what? I liked it because it made people, I got a few comments like, why is he saying it that way? I go, I don't care. People still hear it's me, so that's fine. Yeah.
Technically, it is Diablo Wheelworks.
Correct.
And Ryan Morse is the owner and operator of this business, which focuses on wheel building. I mean, that's your bread and butter, right?
That is my bread and butter. It's what I want to do the most, like to do the most, for sure.
So we're going to talk about wheel building today, specifically custom wheel building.
Yes.
And why don't you, first of all, make your case for why I should choose custom wheels over off-the-shelf stuff.
Sure. I guess the biggest reason, the biggest benefit for custom wheels is you get to pick exactly what you want, with me hopefully helping you along the way to make the proper decisions. Does everybody need custom wheels? No. There's a lot of wonderful high-end to medium-end sort of tier 1, tier 2, and even tier 3 wheels out there that will do a great job. But if you want something specific or a certain color or a certain look or a certain mixture of parts, or you just want to make sure that your stuff is actually hand-built by somebody that cares, I would say those are the main reasons.
Well, this audience here, of course, is very interested in endurance mountain biking, going the distance, long 100-mile, grueling events. So let's start with rim choice. With that in mind, I'm doing the Leadville 100. I'm going to do some 50-mile mountain bike races. What kind of rim material do you like? Aluminum or carbon or either?
Yes to both. When it comes to choosing one or the other, usually it comes down to the cost, and or somebody wants something regardless of what may be recommended. So the biggest benefit of alloy is it's lower cost. It's not as expensive if you kill a wheel and need to replace a rim. The benefit of carbon is obviously not the price, but typically it is a lighter weight rim that can handle, believe it or not, especially now with some of these new rims that are coming out by a few wonderful companies, can handle a little bit more abuse than an alloy rim and live to tell the tale.
Yeah. In other words, failure is going to go on the side with carbon. It's going to hold up to the abuse a little bit more.
Typically, yes. Typically, yes. Yeah.
Now, let's get to spokes then. Again, cross-country, endurance cross-country. We're worried about weight.
Sure.
How do spokes come into play with that?
Spokes are going to be, when you start adding up numbers, you have lots of spokes, lots of nipples. So, the fewer the amount, typically the lighter the wheel, but then some of the integrity, strength, durability can go down. So that's also where the benefit of carbon rims come in, because you can have a lower spoke count wheel with better rigidity and strength and durability. But when it comes to spokes, I tend to make sure that I try to tailor the spoke to either the customer's cost or their wants or both. There's people want lightweight, people want durable, people want cheap sometimes. And you can't always get all three, but in the grand scheme of things, stainless steel spokes from good manufacturers are by far and above the best way to go. There are other materials on the market, carbon, synthetic fiber spokes. But when it comes down to serviceability, usability, and cost, stainless steel spokes are by far the best way to go. There's not a lot of option beyond stainless steel anymore. There used to be galvanized, but thank goodness most of that's gone. When it comes to popular spokes, you're looking at lightweight bladed like a Sapum CX-Ray. I would say that's sort of the de facto spoke that everybody knows, because the market's been sort of overrun, I think in a good way, by the popularity of that spoke, because it does offer very good low weight, very high strength and durability. Do you need that? Not necessarily. You can always go with a standard butted round spoke and save quite a bit of money on a wheel build. But at the same time, there are some benefits to a thin bladed spoke, or for that matter, a thin butted spoke over a thicker butted spoke, and especially over a straight gauge spoke.
And then again, back to spoke count.
Yes.
As a wheel builder,
Yes.
Does that make a difference to you as far as how strong of a wheel or how good of a performing wheel you can build?
Sure. I mean, I'm conservative. I'll always push somebody to put a few more spokes on, because what's, 15, 25, 30 more grams. But the reality is people want lightweight. So if you can have lightweight with reasonable cost and great durability, most people end up going with a lighter bladed spoke like a Sapum CX-Ray or a Pillar Wing. There's a couple brands out there, DT, Aerolite. So, yeah.
And you've also told me about why J-bend spokes, and the bend at the flange of the hub, you want that J-bend, why that works better for us people who are particularly abusive on our equipment.
Sure. The number one for me is it's been around forever. To be honest, so has straight pull. You look at some of the designs from 100 years ago and you will find straight pull hubs. But a majority of wheels that have been built and that are out there, at least what I've seen, 99% of the time it's a J-bend spoke. And the benefit of that is you will always be able to find a spoke at a bike shop, a wheel builder. They're going to be much more easily accessible than a straight pull spoke. In a perfect world, if you bust a spoke, as long as it's J-bend, it can be, that spoke can be replaced and you're okay to go. It doesn't always have to be the same spoke if there isn't one available. You can fix it at least. So that's the big benefit, at least in my book. The other thing from a wheel builder standpoint, at least my experiences, figuring out the overall spoke lengths you need with a straight pull hub, it's a lot harder to, come to make the proper measurements and figure out the overall geometry of the hub. The few that I've built, I pull a little bit more hair out building those wheels than I do on a J-bend.
Mm-hmm. Let's get out to nipples now.
Yes.
A lot of people just say, oh, chance to put some color in my bike, but there's more going on there, right?
There is. Alloy nipples, I would say, are popular, number one, because of color, like you just mentioned. Alloy nipples from the main manufacturers, have gotten a lot better. Alloy nipples tend to degrade over time a bit more quickly, and there's a few reasons for that. Where we live in Southern California, a lot of people ride right by the coast, and salt air will cause all sorts of corrosion over time. And that can make the nipple a bit more brittle. Anodizing on most of these alloy nipples has gotten quite a bit better. So alloy does hold up a bit better than it did. But, again, most of the wheel builders, myself included, most of the wheel builders I know, we tend to recommend brass because it holds up better for a much longer period of time. We've found this throughout even production wheels, like from our friends at ENVE, who initially were doing, I think it was a pillar, it might have not been anodized, but it was a silver alloy internal nipple that ultimately, with a combination of from the elements that you ride into the tubeless sealant that you use, can conspire to make all kinds of yuck out of your nipples. So brass does hold up better longer, but there's a weight penalty. The cost is lower for brass, but the weight is higher. A typical alloy nipple is 0.33, 0.34 grams each, whereas a typical brass is about a gram to just a hair over. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to rotating weight, you can lose weight very easily by going with alloy nipples.
Mm-hmm. We're going to, in a future episode, talk about hubs, specifically when it comes to boost, yes, non-boost, and all that. Right. But I do want to touch on hubs real quick because it's an important part of building a set of wheels. Do you make recommendations when a customer comes to you, or do you go with what they want?
I will always make recommendations based on, my experiences and what I know of building wheels for the last 25 years. Do my clients always listen to me? No. Do I sometimes turn wheel builds down because of that? Not all the time, but it's happened a few times where what they're wanting is, in my opinion, not going to work well for how they want to ride. But yeah, there are a few go-to hubs that I like and I'll recommend from a few price points. But when it comes down to it, most people are pretty reasonable and they want something that they don't want to have to worry about. So rarely do they make poor choices.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and the name brands in this arena of hubs, DT Swiss, Chris King, those are going to all give us the reliability. White Industries.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Shimano makes wonderful hubs. The downside to Shimano hubs, I would say the only real negative is weight, at least at the Ultegra level and down. Dura-Ace, XT, XTR, especially with the newer hubs that are coming out with microspline, the weight has decreased on some of these hubs. The other thing is, Shimano doesn't always do a high or have a lot of choice in spoke count, whereas DT, Chris King, White Industries, Onyx, all of the nicer, smaller brands, you have a lot more choice, whether it be color, hole count, and or interface with the cassette that's going on there.
Okay, we get all these parts together, and then you're going to help us make a decision on lacing pattern. Tell us about the lacing pattern. What does all this mean to me as I'm riding my bike?
Well, lacing pattern is usually a choice made by the wheel builder based on a few factors: how many spokes are being used, how big or small the rider is, what the rider is going to be doing with the wheels. A lot of times I base the decision mostly on hole count. So I've found that some of the way other wheel builders build wheels, again, I'm a little bit more conservative. The default most people will know and hear is 3-cross. And that has become, over time, has proven itself to be a very stable cross pattern. But there's a limit to when you can use it. If you are going to a 24-hole hub, 3-cross does not play nicely. There's, too much weird angle as it exits and enters the hub to the rim. So usually those choices are made by the wheel builder. If the client is interested in a certain pattern because of look to me is not as important as functionality and durability. So those discussions are had and try to rein things back in.
And then spoke tension too is another big thing you play with.
Absolutely.
Is there much room for variability here, or how do you mess with that?
I would say the industry standard is you want to get things sort of as high as possible, but within reason. So most rim manufacturers will give you a recommended maximum spoke tension. And, you don't want to go above that. There's reasons for that. It can cause structural issues to the rim in a sense of you have a lot of load on a spoke and a nipple pulling a rim. So you don't want to go above or too much above recommended spoke tension. But there are issues out there now that are more recent, I would say, in the last 10 years, and especially now with road tubeless. Again, this is sort of a hot topic. Some wheel builders don't think tubeless affects wheel tension as much as others. I've done my own little homegrown testing to find that, a tubeless tire, especially a road tubeless tire, and sealant can detension the wheel a little bit more than a standard tube and tire. From the simple fact of just installing the tire without any air pressure, once it's installed, you now have an external force compressing the rim. So as soon as that external force is compressing the rim, it's dropping the tension just a little bit. Once you add air, that compression actually can increase as well. So there's a point where you can get enough tension drop in a well-built, pre-stressed wheel that's been spoke squeezed and, trying to get all of the demons out of the wheel so that there's nothing you can do to make tension drop other than external forces, like installing a tire, especially a tubeless tire.
Okay, well, lots to consider there when getting a custom wheel. This will be my last question, and this will be the one that a lot of people probably have on their minds. Can a custom wheel make me faster? Can it be the difference maker?
Yes, I think so. I for a while, I did a lot of road wheels. More recently, in the last 3-4 years, it's turned into a lot of gravel and mountain wheels. Most of the time, when customers call me back and let me know how things are going, they tell me it feels like a new bike. It feels different. It feels better. It feels faster. So I think so, absolutely. And it's not to say there are, like I said earlier, a lot of great, hand-built, pre-made wheels out there that can offer a lot of those same things, but they'll also make your bike probably a little bit better as long as they're a well-built wheel with nice even tension.
All right, again, it's Diablo Wheelworks, and he is Ryan Morse. He is a custom wheel builder. Look him up if you're in the LA area, or just look him up online. He's happy to help. And a postscript on carbon versus aluminum rims, Fatty. Just because a bike comes with carbon wheels doesn't make those wheels superior. I have ridden carbon wheels that were complete duds, including a set on a gravel bike that were surprisingly heavy. So it's not as easy as picking carbon over aluminum.
Yeah, material matters.
Yeah, material does matter.
But it is not the only thing that matters. That's the real point. Quality is what matters most. And that's a perfect segue, actually, to one of our sponsors, DNA Cycling. We have made a lot of noise about the fact that DNA can be a great one-stop shop for your custom kit. But I think it's worth emphasizing that this is cycling clothing that is produced in northern Italy, which is the epicenter of a deep-rooted tradition of passionate craftsmanship and, as we've been talking about, quality.
Yeah, we're talking seamstresses who have gone to university to hone their skills and multiple generations that have been in the trade for decades, both behind the seams. That was really well written there, Patty. Behind the seams and
lots of puns.
On the saddle.
Yeah, each handcrafted garment is processed, cut, decorated, sewn, assembled, and inspected by DNA's very small, dedicated staff in Italy. And what this means for you is an unmistakable fit, consistent and high quality and amazing style. With DNA custom cycling gear, you're going to look good and you're going to feel great.
And DNA is offering a 10% discount to our listeners. Just go to dnacycling.com and in the custom apparel inquiry page, choose other in the Where Did You Hear About Us drop down, then type Leadville Podcast.
We are super lucky to have ENVE as a supporter of this show as well. They've been with us since season 1, episode 1. In other words, right since the beginning. In addition to sharing product with us, ENVE is here to share some really deep and broad knowledge. This is a company that is at the forefront of the wheel technology industry. And so when we outlined our wheel episode, ENVE was, of course, a critical part of that lineup.
Jake Pantone, Vice President of Product and Marketing, is our go-to at ENVE. In this discussion, we get into a broad range of topics: rim standards, tubeless technology, wheel stiffness, building the perfect wheel set. But we start with some topical stuff, the new Foundation series from ENVE, and news that Mavic is going through some financial struggles and how, if at all, that affects ENVE.
The situation with Mavic, we wish them the best and hope everything works out for them, but it doesn't in terms of, it doesn't really have any direct bearing on ENVE as a business and sort of our future. So just the confusion for anybody that is under the impression that Mavic and ENVE are the same company or owned by the same thing, that we can just dispel that myth right now and let everybody know that we are owned by different groups at this point. ENVE is still owned by Amer Sports, and Mavic is owned by Regent or Regency. I'm not exactly sure the name.
It doesn't matter as long as we know that you're there and you guys are in great shape and moving forward. That's all we really wanted to get out with that question was ENVE is fine. Don't worry. Mavic's its own separate deal now. ENVE is going to roll ahead with its fine product. So that's good to hear, right, Fatty?
That's the goal. Yep.
So was roll a pun there, Hadi? I'm just wanting to double check on that.
It is.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the new stuff that you guys have been making. I've been really excited to learn about the AM30. But of course, if you look in my garage, what I've got is, I think, 4 sets of the M525 wheel set. Clearly, that has been, the wheel of choice for both my wife and for me. But say if I were starting over, would you say the AM30 is a good Leadville bike?
The wheel is not on paper a really great choice for somebody that's a cross-country racer. However, it does have some things about it that would be very beneficial to, anybody that's looking for a everyday rideable, all-purpose, do everything kind of wheel. And it has all the modern features and amenities that you would expect from a carbon mountain wheel. It's extremely durable. It has an ENVE developed technology called wide hookless bead, which is a really wide leading edge. It's the same technology that's included in the M525. It's just it's a fat hookless bead that dissipates energy when you impact or pinch the tire between the proverbial rock in the trail and the hard place being the edge of the carbon rim, and it prevents the rim from being pinched flat or cut. So that's a really key and important technology, foundational, hence why it's included in that collection. The AM30 also has molded spoke holes, which allow us to make a lighter, more efficient structure. And the new thing with the AM30 is it has an external spoke or external nipple. As far as its use for cross-country race and like endurance applications, the most I think I can say is stay tuned.
Ooh.
We do, and we will.
See, now I'm wanting you to tell me a little bit more. That stay tuned is not satisfying.
Well, let me put it this way. ENVE believes in products that are purpose-built. And so you're not going to find a one-wheel quiver at ENVE. And that's just how it is. So,
Jake, the Foundation series is a very interesting move for ENVE. I mean, this is a company that has prided itself on putting out the best product it possibly can, and almost like regarding price, like whatever it costs to make it, we're going to make it. The price is what it is because that's what it costs to make a high-end product. Take us inside the internal discussions real quick, though. I imagine there was, I could envision, like this happened at, for instance, Evil Bikes, where they were starting to discuss making a gravel bike, which they eventually did. But there was some pushback internally because some folks in the company thought, that's not us. I mean, we don't do that. We don't do gravel bikes. We do full suspension mountain bikes. Was there an internal struggle at ENVE too regarding whether or not to do a wheel set and a wheel series at a lower price point based on your history as a company?
Absolutely. About a 10-year struggle. No, it's, you have to understand ENVE, yes and no. I think the struggle was, for people to wrap their heads around the strategy and really understanding like who we are as a brand. And ENVE never set out to be exclusively niche. We've always set out and intended to be best in class. And so it's really about, how you look at it. So it took us a while to come to market with a lower price point wheel for a variety of reasons. And really the main reason is we didn't have a clear path or an authentic path to a lower price point until just in the last, 18 months to, about 18 months ago, it sort of became clear that there was a reasonable path, like an authentic ENVE path to getting this more, this foundation collection out the door and rolling. And when I say an authentic way of doing it, what I'm talking about is it is not the ENVE way to intentionally make something worse. So, we have a host of technologies, and for us to intentionally say, okay, well, here's a wheel that's not really different. We're just going to take technologies and features and benefits away and maybe make it intentionally heavier, just so we can charge less for it and create a gap between, our premium M series and the foundation, or SES and the road foundation. That never felt or sat right with us. We are looking to improve the ride experience. Our mantra is to create a better ride experience. So it doesn't really do us any favors to sell a cheaper product that lacks performance to somebody. The other thing that was tempting and that some brands certainly do is they take technology that's been superseded and they repurpose it at a lower price point. So, for example, it'd be like us taking our old M50s, and then, once we came out with the 525, then taking M50s and selling them for half price. And that never sat right either, because, nothing really changed other than it was superseded. And it sort of slaps the customers who paid, the full retail price or the in-season pricing for it, a year earlier. And that sort of just sets things up for, well, down the road, ENVE's just going to take the premium product and they'll just discount it and it'll be half price. And so you can sort of train the consumer to expect that, which, is also not necessarily a healthy thing for the business, because again, the margin structure wouldn't support, it wouldn't be sustainable that way. So that never really felt right, because all the labor and everything's still there. You can't really just charge less for it because something new came out, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because the cost structure stays the same.
I think with carbon, Jake, there's this huge performance benefit to carbon, but there's also, I think, a conception that carbon is stiffer, and stiffer is what we want all the time, and we want it as stiff as possible. But in your M525 wheels and in the G wheels, and I'm assuming in the new AM30 wheels, you've kind of taken a different approach, if I'm not wrong, and that is, we don't need to be as stiff as we possibly can be as a company. We can lighten it up a little bit. Why did you take that path when it comes to some of your wheels?
Back in the day, you used to need a really stiff rim to compensate for lackluster bracing angles from the hub spacing. And so over the years, we've gotten better and better and better at making the rim structure really strong and durable. And then as the bracing angles and the width of the flanges and the hubs and everything have been further refined, we've been able to then take material back out of the rim, because we don't need to be as stiff that way, because now you're getting more assistance from the bracing angles from the hub and the spokes and the spacing there. And Then the other piece of the puzzle here is tire volumes are also are changing, and a lot of it's kind of a separate thing altogether. But yeah, long story short, I guess what I'm saying is back a few years ago, the focus was just on how do you make a rim extremely durable, and now the focus is really on refining the ride quality of a carbon rim, and that's really what a lot of our focus is on these days. It's about finding the right amounts of stiffness and what's good stiffness, what's bad stiffness, and there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and there's around stiffness, and that's something we're really trying to understand. Like, is it actually that you need the rim to be just more muted, and do you need it to just absorb and deaden feedback from a trail, or do you need the actual rim structure itself to be more flexible? And we're spending a lot of time and development efforts right now really trying to produce data that we can share at some point to really show the differences between good and bad stiffness and what it is exactly you're looking for and what that means to the ride performance on the trail. I think the biggest thing as it relates to stiffness, and we're still dealing with is in the aftermarket, is a lot of customers are, when we hear complaints about stiffness, I would say probably 8 out of 10 times it's because somebody's running about 10 psi higher than they should be, because maybe they came off of a rim that was like a 25 millimeter internal, and now they've bumped up to a 30 millimeter internal, or they've come from a rim that was like a 20, basically their last bike had a narrow rim on it and their new bike has a wider rim. And so they always ran one pressure, and they just haven't sort of put the pieces together to run lower pressure in the new wheel setup. And so a lot of times that can have an effect on, it 100% has an effect on what the ride quality of the wheel will be. But yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. The AM30 has a new cross section, and it's really, given it's all mountain intense in chops, it's really meant to be a smooth operator to help deaden the feedback from the trail without compromising sort of that ENVE feel that we're known for, which is really lively and sort of snappy acceleration and response from a wheel. And then, you look at the 525 and our G series wheels. The G series is extremely special that way because it's designed for bikes that are effectively rigid or no suspension and relatively low tire volume. And so it's, in that situation, it's really important that the wheels have a high level of compliance in them. And same for cross country racing with the 525, like, shorter travel bike, lower volume tire, we want to get a little bit more compliance and comfort out of the wheel. So
let's move on to sizing and standards. This has been a large discussion within your industry, both on the tire side and on the rim maker side, as to standards. Where does ENVE stand regarding any emerging standards that the industry may come around, whether that be rim width or rim diameters? Give us an update on where that stands right now and how ENVE might be involved.
Well, as a rim manufacturer, we are required to, or we have a standard that we've been following for some time now. And if we're speaking specifically to rim standards, we have ETRTO, which this year there was an update made that really helped add some clarity and definition to what prior was pretty vague in terms of its in terms of the requirements from not so much requirement. It was more related to the road than the mountain. There's since tubeless has been around on mountain for quite some time, there is a standard that has been defined in terms of what your rim's bead seat diameter needs to be. It was where it's gotten vague over the years is that as road wheel technology has advanced, effectively the road wheel technology has advanced and far outpaced the updates to these standards. And so you would get you could look at the old ETRTO standard and say, well, you're not following the standard. But the reality was there just wasn't one. There wasn't an update that accommodated for sort of the modern road tubeless setups. So what we had done, and what other rim manufacturers had done as well, is effectively we had just adopted the mountain, the 29-inch 700C mountain rim ETRTO standard in terms of its tubeless. And so now that's been defined in the new standard, and we future proofed for that in our bead seat diameters some time ago. So we knew that the changes were going to be put in effect sooner than later, and so our rims have always followed that standard.
Well, let me ask you from a consumer level. I mean, is this largely just an industry discussion that consumers will never really feel in the end, or is this something that's going to have a direct effect on the rims we purchase, the tires we mount on those rims? Do you feel like the consumer should be paying attention to this discussion?
Yes. It depends on what side of the fence you're on in terms of mountain versus road. If you're a mountain rider, there's not really many issues that I don't think we really have issues on the mountain bike side of things. Like we've been running tubeless for more than a decade at this point, and the technology is quite refined, and the kinks have been worked out for the most part, and tire pressures are quite a bit lower than you see on the road, and things are pretty happy and hunky-dory on the mountain bike side of things as far as tubeless is concerned. I think the last major advancements in mountain bike tubeless were really made on the downhill side of things. It's not too many years ago that tubeless made its way into gravity racing, and and on that front, back in those times there was definitely some pain points with tires blowing off rims or whatever. Because the bead stiffnesses weren't quite up to spec yet, or up to where they need to be, or not accommodating for the sort of loads that a World Cup downhill racer could put into a rim. And so there's that. But on the mountain bike side of things, I mean, I don't think people really have much to be concerned about, other than being proficient in knowing how to set up a wheel tubeless, and knowing how to sort of maintain your sealant levels, and it's worth spending time and making sure you know how to change a flat tire or how to address a flat tire. And that's I think where we're at on the mountain bike side of things. On the road side of things, it's a completely different equation. A lot of road riders are still very new to tubeless, so the general tribal knowledge in terms of how to set up and maintain and use tubeless tires on the roadside is still kind of coming around. And on the tire side of things, the manufacturers are going through a lot of the same pains that were solved with mountain tires a decade ago. In a year or two from now, I think the road tubeless situation is going to look a lot like it does on the mountain bike side of things, where there isn't really a question anymore of whether a tire is compatible or not with the rim you're going to put it on, because there is sort of a minimum requirement that is being established in terms of what the bead diameter and what the bead stiffness needs to be. And that's kind of one of the things with the ETRTO standard. The standard that's a little bit frustrating is there's absolutely a defined dimensional tolerance for a rim manufacturer to maintain, but there isn't necessarily one for a tire manufacturer. So so I think those are kind of the pain points we're working through right now, and that's why ENVE has a tire compatibility list for our hookless road wheels, because I mean, there's some tires that are really sort of forward thinking and have really good bead stiffness, and they're really safe and reliable tires, and that list grows longer every week. And then there's other tires that are just being slower it's just taking longer for their manufacturers to update them. And but again, we're all having a conversation, and rim manufacturers, or at least ENVE, is definitely in conversations with most tire manufacturers, and we're all working together to ensure that the consumer will hopefully at some point simply be able to, walk into a store and buy whatever rim and whatever tire suits them, and, away they go.
Or the opposite, and you get a direct recommendation as to what works. I mean, with your automobile, it's almost like you've got these wheels, these are the tire sizes that go on it, and there's almost no ifs, ands, or I mean, you can play around a little bit, but but not too much. But yeah, I get your point, and I think that's where the struggle is right now. It's like, can we get these two parties to match up and agree on something? And one of the lessons I think that's being taught here, Fatty, is that, the higher your pressure goes, whatever system you're on, the more careful you want to be. Like, yeah, mountain, if you're running 15 to 20 PSI, your margin for error is a lot larger. But as you get up into the 80, 90, 100 PSI range, you really want to be careful. You want to be consulting charts and specs and what manufacturers are saying about what works with what, just like Jake was talking about there.
Is anyone writing it at 100 PSI?
Well,
not me.
I'm just like, is that still a thing?
It's an important thing. And I mean, I know this is the Leadville podcast, but anybody that rides Leadville probably rides a road bike too. So, pay attention to our tire pressure recommendation charts. We put one out a while ago, and many other manufacturers have followed suit, creating tire pressure charts. You just trust them. Almost any time that we see an issue with tire and rim sort of interface or blow off issues, most of the time it's due to somebody running, again, that same anecdote I said earlier, which is, you used to run 90 or 100 PSI or 110, and then you switched from a 23 to a 25C tire, or a 25 to a 28. Or your rim went from a 19 internal to a 21, or a 21 to a 25. As your tire volume and your rim volume goes up, your pressure comes down. And it's just, please pay attention to those charts, because they're there. They're based on data. They're based on real pressures that people run that are calibrated and proven. And so just because you ran 100 PSI in your last wheel set and your last tire does not mean you shouldn't run 65 in this new setup, or that you're not running too high of pressure. So, I mean, just as an example, I ride our AR wheels, which is a 25 millimeter internal with a 28 millimeter tire, and I run 50 PSI on the road. And that's a fast, efficient
50.
Yeah,
50 PSI.
Now, Jake weighs 110 or something like that too. So
yeah. I'm 155 pounds. So yeah, I'm on the lighter side of things, but again, there's a couple guys here that are in the 190 to 225 range, and they're running basically 65 to 75 PSI.
And it's, Jake, it's the lowest number we want to go with, right? If the rim says max, let's say for the AR wheel, I think that's a max of 80 PSI, and your tire says 90, always go with the lower number, right? Would that be kind of the common advice you'd give out?
Yeah, 100%. For ENVE, yeah, never exceed our max rim pressure ratings. And as a consumer, if you're looking at the tire, I would not put too much trust or faith in the max PSI rating on any tire. I would always consult your rim manufacturer's max pressure rating. And then whatever the lowest pressure is, as you were saying, Hadi, whatever the lowest pressure is, whether it's on the rim or the tire, always default to whatever the lowest max pressure is.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true, partially because a lot of us come from an old school mindset of hard is fast, where, I remember the, 120 PSI days, and it felt, you felt like you were going faster when you were running those tires hard. And it is just not like that now.
Yeah, there was an interesting, I don't know how many of the listeners are familiar with Josh Portner, who formerly of Zip, currently the owner and founder, or the owner of Silka.
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, we know him quite well.
Yeah, good. So yeah, I mean, I remember Portner. We were talking about this a while ago, and he was telling us a story about back in the day when they were doing some testing on the cobbles at Roubaix, and we're sort of trained to believe that when you pump your tires up, when they're really hard, you get to feel the ground more, right? You get to feel more of the bumps, and it sends a harder frequency, so you just feel it, and so it actually gives you the sense that you're going faster because you're feeling more of the road or the trail or whatever as you're basically feeling every little bump. But I just thought it was interesting because they had basically data back then showing that, running these lower tire pressures were faster, but the racers would be like, it just doesn't feel fast. And you'd be like, well, you went 30 seconds faster with this less pressure, whatever the timing was. And they'd be like, yeah, but it can't be faster. it can be faster, and it is faster. So, and again, it's not there's also a misconception that it's a race to see who can run the lowest pressure, and that's not true either. It's about running the right pressure. On the mountain bike especially, you don't want your tires folding over in corners. You want your tires to be supportive while cornering, but conforming when you're going straight and putting down the power. So again, it's not a race to the lowest pressure possible. It's about finding the right tire pressure. So,
well, Fatty, that gets us to our final topic here, I think, and that would be pressure. Now, ENVE has gone a long ways to putting out pressure charts. They have a pressure station that they run around when we can be out with each other in mobile situations. So let's talk to Jake quickly about pressure and how we get it right. Now, Jake, it seems like your charts and everything, that's a great place to start, correct? Like go there, see what size tires you have, what rim width you have, how much you weigh, grab your data set there, your numbers, and then what do we do? Would we want to then field test and adjust? How do we go about fine-tuning proper pressure?
Our intention and goal is it's not a definitive, this is your absolute tire pressure. It is a starting point. And, your proverbial mileage may vary, statement applies. And there's regional considerations as well. There's being honest about how much you weigh and considering what your bike weighs as well. So, be honest with yourself. How much do you weigh actually? And so anyway, our goal is to basically give you a starting point. I think it's really important to consider the region and where you're riding and the type of terrain you're riding in. So like we're in Utah, at least Fatty and I are, and I guess even in, SoCal, basically, places where it's hot and dry, you're not going to have the super tacky, super grip dirt that you get up in the Northwest. And so, when I riding around here on the Wasatch Front on the mountain bike, I'm probably going to be running like 2 to maybe even 5 psi lower than what I run when I go and ride in the Northwest. Or when I go ride down in Moab, for example, where there's, slick rock and can be endless traction depending on what you're riding. And so there's sort of an element of the more grip and more traction you have, the more tire pressure you can theoretically seem to run. And sort of the looser the terrain and the more variable it is, a little bit lower tire pressure allows the tire to conform better and dig a little bit. And there's other things to consider, tread compounds. So softer tread compounds may allow you to run a higher pressure than hard compounds. And so there's definitely variables that the calculator is not going to be able to fully take into consideration, but it is intended to give you a starting point. And then from there, just fine tuning what feels best to you. And I guess from there, we can give you a pressure, but the next thing is making sure that you're actually running that pressure, which means you need to have a pump or a pressure gauge that is accurate, which is really important. So you can do that by there's definitely the inexpensive tire pressure gauges, the little digital tire pressure gauges. There's some cool little analog ones as well. It's always good to have both. It's always good to test your pump's pressure gauge against a digital one or something that's calibrated, so you can at least know how your pump's tire pressure gauge reads, because we've definitely seen that we've literally bought 5 of the exact same pump and seen the pressure readouts range as much as 10 psi. So I mean there can be variability in tire pressure gauges, and if you want to get real serious about it and check out a really cool tool, we have our inflation stations, our tire pressure stations that we if you've been to any events like with ENVE, where ENVE's been at, we have those tire pressure inflators there, and they're super high-end calibrated automatic inflators that are specifically built for bicycle use. So, the volume of air they're metering into the tire it's not just an automotive inflator that's repurposed for bike in terms of all the components. The components are actually customized for the volumes that you're dealing with bicycle tires. And so, we actually do sell those, but they are not necessarily the most affordable thing depending on how much you value your inflation. But, they're an awesome tool, and those are they're the premium option if you're looking for, the ultimate in inflation devices. So again, we take our tire pressure seriously.
Definitely part of my dream garage, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of not dream garages, but dream stuff. So if I were building my new dream Leadville mountain bike, my 2021 Leadville mountain bike, obviously the parts that matter almost more than the frame is going to be the wheels. From hub to rim to tires, what are you going to go with?
Yeah, I mean, this is easy for me to speak to, and it's really a story Envy's really been trying to push and promote for years. I mean, nobody listening to this podcast isn't aware that, wheels are absolutely the number one upgrade you can make to any bike. If I was on a budget and I was trying to build like an ultimate race bike for, I don't know I'm not sure, everybody's budget are different, but, bang for the buck, either a high-end aluminum frame or the lower end, the lower end carbon frame with like an XT build out, or, even like a GX type build out, but a pair of ENVE wheels, that's going to be a heck of a bike on a budget. Like I think, basically, especially looking at like a Leadville bike, as far as the priority goes and spend, I mean, I'd say wheels are the first place you want to spend the money. You could look at the frame second, and then the components is third, in terms of, meaning I would sort of rather have a GX build on a nice carbon frame with ENVE wheels than an XTR build or a whatever, a full axis, Eagle build on a cheap frame, I guess, so to speak. Like, bang and performance for the buck, I'm going to go wheels first. And also, don't forget your cockpit. Like, don't buy the carbon frame with the cheap aluminum handlebar. Get the aluminum frame and put a nice carbon handlebar on it. I mean, those are differences you're going to feel, and they're going to have the biggest implications in terms of weight savings and ride quality. So, and then on the premium end, yeah, I mean, if you got the money, just go all in, but make sure you put a pair of 525s on it, because that is definitely the wheel of choice for any endurance cross country event. And yeah, for Leadville, can't beat it, I'm sure. So
can I put you on the spot and ask, I mean, obviously we're going to go with the ENVE rims, probably the 525 rims. What hubs? What is your favorite hub? I know that you sell a number of them when you build, but what is for the Leadville racer? What hubs?
It really comes, yeah. So what hubs? We're big fans of the Industry 9 product at this point. We also still maintain and have a great relationship with our friends over at Chris King. No holds barred, I'm probably going to buy Chris King. They do make a ceramic hub offering. I'm not a huge fan of ceramic hubs personally, but just, in terms of, performance for the dollar, I'm not quite sure. I'm not really a ceramic. I don't really see the ceramic argument if you're trying to save money. But if not, go all in, King hubs, ceramic, and I like the King, personally, I'm not a huge fan of super high engagement hubs, especially for an event like Leadville. Like, I just there's not a huge benefit, and a Chris King hub is still quite high engagement. I'm sort of a departure from most, because I actually prefer the Industry 9 101 hub or 1-to-1 hub, which is their more price point oriented hub, versus the Hydra. Just it's lower engagement, and I just like the feel of the engagement on that hub better. But hubs that's the beauty. We make rims, and we generally let people put whatever hub into them they like. But currently our offering is 101 and i9, Industry 9 Hydra, 101, and then Chris King are the main hubs that we stock. So I mean, you can't really go wrong with any, and if you're on a budget, definitely look at that 1-to-1 hub.
Again, big thanks to Jake Pantone, VP of Product and Marketing for ENVE, for covering this big range of topics with us. We know you all love mountain biking, but having an understanding of where technology for wheels is headed, it's going to help you as you make your next wheel choice.
And to bring our two interviews together, Fatty, ENVE does offer rims for sale. So if you do want to work through a custom wheel builder like Diablo Wheelworks, that can be done. You can still order a set of rims only from ENVE. And when it comes to building wheels, like Jake and Ryan both discussed, hub choice is a big part of your consideration. And there are lots of choices. In addition to the brands you heard about in our interviews, we'd like to remind you that Shimano also has some terrific offerings if you plan on building up a set of wheels.
Yeah, I was checking out Shimano's mountain bike rear hubs offering when I was speccing out my own wheel set recently. There are 28 different hubs that they offer. They've got all the bases covered. Various hole counts, spacings, including boost and super boost, straight pull, traditional spoke flanges, and if you are running 12-speed, they have the hub body you are going to need, and that is microspline, which is where I went, believe it or not, for my single speed.
Yeah, that's 28 different rear hubs, mind you. That wasn't even a count of the front hubs they have, too. And that's just mountain bike. So they've really tried to cover everything for the folks who want to do their own wheel set. Shimano has stuck to its cup and cone technology as well for years. And the reason is dependability and serviceability. I have a set of Shimano road hubs that I've had around for years now, and they are terrific on both fronts. Serviceable, dependable. No bearings to chase down. Just open them up, clean those parts, re-grease, and you're back in business. And one other thing I've grown to love about Shimano is center lock.
Oh, yeah.
Now, some folks might say that not all companies make center lock rotors. That's true, but I like this idea of center lock, especially when it comes to packing up your bike for travel, because those center locks, they twist off real quick. You can stash your rotors away in a nice safe spot so they don't get bent or crushed as you're flying somewhere or going somewhere. So the center lock rotors are an easy way to remove compared to 6-bolt rotors, and a much safer idea for your rotors, especially when traveling.
Yep. If you come and take a look at my bike garage, you will see all center lock rotors. So if you are building up a set of wheels or if you're thinking about it, be sure to take a look at all of the hubs from Shimano by going to bike.shimano.com.
All right, let's wrap up Season 3, Episode 13 of the Leadville Podcast, presented by Floyd's of Leadville, our special wheel episode. If you like our show, give us a 5-star rating and review over at Apple Podcasts. Also share it with your other cycling friends. And please support our sponsors. Let them know you appreciate them making this show possible.
Yep. Next episode is the second in our Owning It series, where pros, listeners like you and Hottie and me, we are all telling stories of big mistakes we've made and the things we've learned. Well, sometimes we learn something from them. Sometimes we just do dumb stuff. But regardless, you're going to like this show.
Meanwhile, if you have ideas or questions for us, head to the Leadville100podcast.com comment section and get in touch. That's also where you can find a link to our Slack workspace and jump into our ongoing conversation.
Everyone, good luck in your training. Thanks for listening, and we're going to see you at the 2021 starting line.